minute, Cathy.
Sorry, Kim, I don't have time to talk. I've got to get to court.
It won't take long. But I couldn't sleep last night after what you said.
I'll be under oath. I have to tell the truth.
Yeah, and you know what the truth is. Steve drove at you deliberately. I don't understand why you suddenly seem to have doubts about that. I meant what I said about being afraid of Steve. That man is dangerous.
I'm sorry, Kim. I don't think we should be having this conversation, not with the trial about to start. If you don't mind.
Oh, Mr. Clark. Good morning.
Good morning, Miss Hughes.
The head's asked me to give you one of these, an agenda for next week's staff meeting.
Thanks, very exciting.
Graham, can I see you this lunchtime?
Yeah?
Something I want to ask you.
Oh?
You won't be able to take her in.
Huh? If I want your opinion, I'll apply for legal aid, OK?
She's right, you know, love.
Look, I take my childcare and responsibilities seriously, Betty. Me and Belle are bonding.
Will you come this way, please?
You know, Laura, this is going to be the happiest week of my life.
If Kim gets sent down, you mean?
When she gets sent down, let's look on the bright side.
Well, I wouldn't count on it. I better go.
Do anything to be able to get in there with you.
Do you want me to have a word with the defence? Ask them to call you first?
Very funny.
All stand.
Are you Kim Jane Marchant?
I am.
Are you Stephen Marchant?
Yes.
You are both charged with theft. That on September 15th, 1998, you stole a stallion, Orsino, valued at £300,000. How do you plead? Mrs. Marchant.
Not guilty.
Mr. Marchant.
Guilty.
You are further charged with attempting to obtain money by deception, namely the insurance from the loss of the horse Orsino. How do you plead? Mrs. Marchant.
Not guilty.
Mr. Marchant.
Guilty.
Mr. Marchant, you are further charged with attempted murder in that on the night of September 15th, 1998, you drove a vehicle at high speed at one Mrs. Cathy Glover with the intent of killing her. How do you plead?
Not guilty.
You may both sit down.
Your Honour, I appear for the prosecution. My learned friend, Mr. Derbyshire, appears as defence counsel for Mrs. Marchant, and my learned friend, Mr. Keating, appears as defence counsel for Mr. Marchant. Your Honour, the accused, Mr. and Mrs. Marchant, are bound together not only by the vows of marriage, but by greed and ambition. They enjoyed wealth. So when they lost all their money, they decided to take desperate measures. Mrs. Marchant will claim that her husband acted alone, but the prosecution will seek to prove that they acted together in planning the theft and the ensuing deception. The plan went disastrously wrong, so much so that in his determination to avoid recognition and capture, Mr. Marchant deliberately tried to kill an innocent young woman, Mrs. Cathy Glover, who had the misfortune to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Hi.
What do you want?
To see you.
You've seen me.
Thought you might be grappling with a fractious spaniel. How's it going, the studying?
Shouldn't you be frying onions or something?
Well, take a minute. I've got something for you.
Hello. I'm looking for Paddy.
He's not here.
Well, I'll see you later.
Would you know where he is?
Yeah, he's out on a call. Working. That's what we do here when people let us. Hello.
Miss Dixon, you agreed a price of £200,000 and at midday on the 15th of September 1998 you met with Mr. Marchant in woods near the home farm stud where he handed over Orsino in exchange for cash. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did Mr. Marchant seem to be knowledgeable about horses?
Well, he brought me the right one.
Let me put it another way. It was Mrs. Marchant who worked at the stud, not Mr. Marchant. She knew all about horses and their value. Doesn't it seem improbable that he could have acted alone without her expertise and knowledge?
Your Honour, my learned friend is inviting the witness to speculate.
I agree. Please disregard that question.
The theft took place in broad daylight. Mrs. Marchant worked at the stud. It must have been very difficult for Mr. Marchant to steal the horse without his wife noticing.
Your Honour...
Miss Sharp, I am not happy with this line of questioning.
Very well, Your Honour. I have no more questions.
Get out of that one, Kim, dear.
Stay there.
They should know everything that you get up to, Dad. Yeah, well, I've more practice than yon, Pillock.
Miss Dixon, did you at any time during the planning and execution of the theft have any dealings with my client, Mrs. Marchant?
No.
Did Mr. Marchant at any time suggest that my client was involved?
No.
Thank you, Miss Dixon.
Cheers, mate. How are you coping without caffeine better?
No problems. There's one I can't do without. In fact, I wish she was here right now.
And yeah, nothing about staff shortage, eh?
Could you do us a favour? What do you reckon to this?
Oh, I didn't know you cared.
It's for when you Burke. It's a Christmas present.
A bit late, aren't you?
I'll go in a field and ask a sheep. I might get a sensible answer.
I'm kidding you. Yeah, it's great. She'll love it.
Yeah? Yeah. Sure, won't she?
So what's the prosecution counsel? I hope she's got the instincts of a Rottweiler.
Why don't you get yourself some lunch?
So who exactly did they see this morning? I mean, it can't have been many. Hasn't been enough time.
Chris, I can't tell you what's going on in there. Not until you've given evidence.
Oh, come on, Laura. Don't be so stuffy. Take your lawyer's wig off. We're friends, aren't we?
We might not be for much longer if you don't give it a rest.
Kim, how nice to see you here. Enjoying your last hours of freedom?
Do you mind if we eat somewhere else?
What for? The words condemned, hearty and breakfast come to mind.
There's a slug in my salad.
You should eat it. It's better than the stuff you'll get in prison.
You said you had something to ask. Am I supposed to guess?
I cannot remember the last time I felt this happy. Being with you it's great. And I don't want to spoil anything, but I was wondering, well, you've been staying over at my house quite a lot recently, and...
I see you want us to cool it for a bit.
No, quite the opposite, silly. I want you to move in with me. There, I said it.
You mean live together?
I'm sorry, it was a bad idea. Forget it.
You took me by surprise, that's all.
Well, does that mean yes or no?
I don't know. I wasn't expecting you to ask.
Saved by the bell?
Mr. Shepherd, on the evening of September the 15th, 1998, you were working as a security guard on the home farm stud.
That's right, yes.
Now, as we know, earlier that day, the horse Orsino was stolen and another horse, Toby, was placed in his stall. During the course of the evening, did you look in Orsino's stall?
No.
Why was that?
Mrs. Marchant said she checked the stalls.
Is that usual?
No.
If you had checked, would you have noticed that the horse in the stall was not, in fact, Orsino?
I think so. I'd have certainly noticed that one of the stalls was empty.
Is it fair to assume that Mrs. Marchant would have noticed that Orsino was missing?
If I would, she would.
So we have to ask why, on that night of all nights, Mrs. Marchant offered to check the stalls. Was it perhaps to conceal the fact that the most valuable horse in the entire stud was missing?
You'd better ask her.
Don't worry, Mr. Shepherd, I intend to.
What do you reckon, Betty, about them horses?
Oh, I don't know, love. I can never tell the difference between a dray horse and a Derby winner.
I've been having that trouble for years, Betty.
Shh. Mr. Shepherd, was this the first time that my client, Mrs. Marchant, had checked the stalls?
No, she did it from time to time.
So, not that unusual then? You didn't walk around with Mrs. Marchant while she made her check?
No, of course I didn't.
So, you don't know how thorough she was?
No.
You don't know whether she looked into every stall or whether she had a casual glance as she walked by? Mr. Shepherd?
No, I don't know.
Exactly. You don't know. In fact, I think it would be fair to say that your so-called evidence amounts to little more than guesswork. Don't you agree?
Chris, I'm not sure I can go through with this.
Of course you can. The whole village is rooting for you.
Maybe, but I'm the one who's got to stand up there.
Well, it won't be too bad. It'll be over before you know it.
You know, Steve could go to prison for a long, long time.
Oh, come on, Kathy. I mean, don't tell me you're starting to feel sorry for him. He deserves everything he gets. For goodness sake, he tried to kill you.
Yeah, well, it all hinges on what I say.
Well, tell them what happened. How he saw you in the road. How he drove the car straight at you. Just tell the truth. That's all you have to do.
I'd called round at the Marchants to see if I could get Steve, Mr. Marchant, to sign up for the fun run.
And who was there when you arrived?
Mrs. Marchant and Zoe Tate, her stepdaughter. They'd been having dinner.
Mr. Marchant?
He was upstairs making some phone calls.
Did you see him up there?
No, I didn't want to disturb him.
Well, how can you be certain he was there?
Because Kim, Mrs. Marchant, went upstairs to ask him about the fun run, and she shouted to him through the door.
Did he reply?
I didn't hear him.
You wouldn't. By his own admission, we know that he wasn't there. The question is whether Mrs. Marchant knew that. What did she do when she came downstairs?
She said he'd be down soon, and then she took some rubbish outside.
Can you say what time that was?
As a matter of fact, I can. It must have been just before 10.
How can you be so sure of that?
Because I went home soon afterwards. I switched the television on. I missed the first part of the 10 o'clock news.
So, Mrs. Marchant was outside the cottage, on her own, just before 10 o'clock. Long enough to make a phone call?
Yes, as I told the police.
Mrs. Marchant came back in, having dealt with the rubbish. What happened then?
We chatted for a few more minutes. Then Mr. Marchant came downstairs.
What did he say?
He said he'd be delighted to do the fun run.
So he got the message, one way or another.
Mrs. Marchant asked him.
Indeed she did. And if Mr. Marchant wasn't in the house when Mrs. Marchant went upstairs, how can she have communicated with him except by phone?
She'll be hungry, Your Honour. She's got all her legs, hasn't she, Dad? I were the same.
It's not that, Your Honour. She's wet.
It must be the excitement. I'll go and change her. Remove that child at once, or you'll be held in contempt of court.
Well, keep your wig on. We don't want to get in the wrong impression of British justice, do we?
Leave this court.
I bet you feel like a good cry too.
Not you again.
Well, I know you're busy. And I know at this precise moment in time you don't particularly want to see me.
Not now, not ever.
Yeah, I can understand you being angry. All is a minute of your time. For old time's sake.
All right, get on with it. Say what you've got to say.
Voila.
What's that?
Your Christmas present.
Christmas present?
I know it's late and I haven't put a ribbon round it, but it's for you, you know, for love.
Well, I don't want it.
You could at least open it. I think you'd be pleased. I chose it really carefully.
Marlon, I don't want your little peace offering. And I don't want you. Now we close the door on your way out, please.
Detective Inspector, the money in this case was never recovered, is that right?
That's correct.
Have you any idea where it might be?
Our inquiries are continuing.
I take it that means no. Is it true that in the early days of your investigation, Mr. Marchant made a full confession and accepted full responsibility for the theft?
Yes, he did.
He in no way implicated my client, Mrs. Marchant?
Not at the time, no. However, he later changed his statement.
Yes, he did, didn't he? He came to you and told you that his wife was involved. But you didn't believe a word of it, did you?
Not at the time, no.
Well, what made you change your mind and decide that Mrs. Marchant had a case to answer?
We received some new evidence.
Ah, yes. The itemized phone bill brought to your notice by Mr. Christopher Tate.
Yes?
Mr. Tate visited you a number of times during your inquiry, did he not?
Yes.
Why?
He thought he might have information that could be useful to us.
And was it?
Not initially, no.
You questioned Mrs. Marchant on 2 occasions, following information received from Mr. Tate.
That wasn't the only reason we brought her in.
You questioned her twice and released her on both occasions without charge.
Yes.
Nonetheless, you seem to have a very high regard for Mr. Tate's ability as an amateur sleuth. Perhaps you should enlist his aid to find the missing money.
Mr. Derbyshire, your levity is inappropriate.
Detective Inspector, would you say that in his efforts to assist you in your inquiries, Mr. Tate was being entirely impartial?
Your Honour, the Detective Inspector's opinions of Mr. Tate are of no relevance.
I agree.
Graham, look, I'm sorry about what I said earlier. Putting you on the spot like that. Can we just forget I ever said it? Start again?
You're assuming I'm going to say no.
We didn't seem very keen on the idea.
It's not that, but it's a big commitment. If I'm honest, it scares me. You said yourself it could ruin everything.
Yeah, I know. But I thought we could make it work. The way I feel about you.
That's mutual. Oh, what the hell, let's give it a try.
Are you sure?
No, but I'm prepared to take a chance if you are.
Oh, it'll be great. You'll see. You'll see.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Mrs. Glover, I realise that this is not going to be very easy for you, but I would like you to tell the court what happened to you on the night of September the 15th last year.
Yes. I'd been out for a meal with a friend, but he had to leave early, so I had to go home alone. On the way back, the taxi driver became very unpleasant, so I asked him to stop the car.
The taxi dropped you on the road not far from the home farm stud?
Yes.
Mrs. Glover, take all the time you need.
Thank you. I set off to walk back home. It was quiet. I'd walked that way 1,000 times before, and I didn't expect.
What happened?
I heard a car engine. I saw headlights coming towards me. I thought it would stop and try and avoid me, but it didn't. It drove straight at me.
Did you see the driver? Mrs. Glover, this is very important. Were you able to recognize the driver? Your Honour, might I request a brief adjournment?
Yes, I think that would be appropriate.
You haven't been to the trial, have you, Jack?
No, I couldn't take a day off from the farm. I don't suppose you've heard any news, have you?
Oh, well, it's early days yet, but I'll probably get an account of the day's proceedings before long.
I reckon Steve Mattson's guilty as sin. He'll have grey before he gets out.
No, it's what the jury thinks that counts.
If you ask me, he's trying to drag Kim into gutter weave, poor lass.
So you think she's in the clear then, do you?
I'll put money on it.
Well, I hope you're right. But if Steve Marchant did try and kill Kathy, they can throw away the key as far as I'm concerned.
I'll drink to that.
Are you quite sure you're ready to continue, Mrs. Glover?
Yes.
Before the adjournment, I asked you if you recognized the driver of the vehicle which knocked you down.
Yes, I did.
And who was it?
It was Steve Marchant.
Are you certain of that?
Yes, it was him. He saw me, he could have avoided me, but he deliberately drove straight at me. He tried to kill me,